All right, how's my volume now? Is that better? All right, well, let me know if you have a hard time hearing me. You can unmute yourself or write it in the chat. So the people that we have participating from parks today, we have some parks regional staff. We have Linda Cooper, our regional director from the Taconic region. We've got Kevin O'Brien, the park manager at James Baird State Park. And then from our agency staff, other agency staff based in Albany, we have Diana Carter. She's the assistant division director for planning and analysis. We have Nancy Stoner, environmental analyst for this master plan, and she's also based in Albany. And myself, Tana Bigelow, and park planner, also based in Albany. So what we're going to cover today in the presentation is basically we're going to talk a little bit about the master planning process. We're going to go over some of the content of the master plan, which the last time I think we had a public meeting, we had it for the seeker scoping document, which was still quite general. So we have a lot more specifics to share with you today. And also, I just wanted to note that the plan is published on the OPRHP website, and you can look at the whole thing there. I really encourage you to do that because we would appreciate any feedback. So we're also going to look at the park and its resources. Kevin's going to talk about the existing conditions at the park, what's available now. We're going to go through some of the specifics of the draft plan. Nancy is going to talk about the environmental review that's been completed as part of the planning process. And then we'll look at some next steps and the timeline for when we end up with the final plan. And after that, we'll open it up for comments. So before we get started, I'd like to hand it over for a few moments to Linda Cooper, our regional director, to say a few words of introduction. Linda?
Thanks, Tana. So welcome, and thanks for joining us here today to review the draft master plan and its associated recommendations. So every single park means something different to each of us. And generally, when we go to our parks, we think of it only in terms of how we individually use it, or what we think when we drive by it, or if we live next door to it, or what our impacts are to us personally. The master plan process, it allows us to engage more broadly and to take a look at the 790 acres that comprises this park. And when you think back to when James Baird, who some of you may know, was a noted engineer, and when he donated his farm to the state in 1938 for use as a state park, the planning that happened during that time really reflected the norms of the 1940s and what they were looking for public use in a park in the 1940s. And it was developed according to the recreational needs of that day. It also provided the land for what was then called the Eastern State, and now we know of as the Taconic Parkway, that has become the link for our Taconic region, which runs from Westchester to Putnam to Dutchess and to Columbia counties, with a number of state parks on its sides. So today, as we review this plan, I want you to look at the action items that touch on many different categories. We're going to be talking about recreation, habitat protection, historic interpretation, and other aspects of parks. And I just want to thank you. Our whole parks team wants to thank you for your interest in the park and your input that will help us assure that this plan reflects the perspectives of our different user groups, of our neighbors, of local officials, as well as our internal staff. And I'm going to turn it back to Tana, who is the planner for the agency, as she said, but she's also the primary author of this document that we're about to review. It's taken endless hours of her organization and research and slogging around every bit of the land, bringing the appropriate people from our State Historic Preservation Office or our environmental crews, and asking questions so that we could try to make a plan that it was really a reflection of what this park is all about. And I want to just publicly thank her for that effort, as well as all the other team members, and also thank Kevin O'Brien as the park manager for the good work that he does. He and his staff does every single day on this park. And we look forward to the input that each of you can have, whether it's just today as you're seeing the presentation, or over the coming days when we'll still be accepting comments on the plan. And we hope that the plan will not be something that sits on the shelf, but there will be a guide for coming years as we allocate dollars and move forward to identify projects and funding in the park. So thanks again.
Thank you, Linda. So now I'd like to go over a little bit about the planning process itself. The plan is developed, as Linda said, it's not exactly endless months, but it's going to have an end. And but we've been working on it. I looked it up. Our first meeting was at the very end in November 2019. So it's almost, it's a little over 2 years now that we've been working on this. The plan is developed by a core team who work together to compile information and ideas from these resources that you see on the screen right here. Public input is, as Linda touched on, is incorporated throughout the planning process. We do park user surveys. We hold public information meetings. We receive comments through the seeker scoping process. And we get comments through the park manager and the regional staff's report of what visitors are talking about at the park. So the master plan, in addition to the public input, which is sort of infused into the content of the plan as we go, we do an inventory of the existing conditions at the park. We consider goals for the park and propose specific actions that we hope will meet these goals. We look at potential environmental impacts of implementing these actions. And then we check in again with park users and stakeholders. And eventually we post a final version on the park's website so the public has one more opportunity to look at it before it's adopted by the agency. So as you can see, a master plan is really a substantial undertaking. And the question is, for each park that we do a master plan for, why are we developing one now? James Baird has never had a master plan. It was initially developed, as Linda said, it was based on the preferences of and interests of Baird himself, as well as recreation trends from the era, which have morphed a bit since then. And also, parks that don't have a master plan, they can develop in a piecemeal way or in ways that don't take the big picture into consideration, which sometimes can result in incompatible uses, deteriorated facilities, or unanticipated impacts to the park's natural environment. And Baird, we have some very important natural resources at Baird. So one of the first things that we do when we're going to start the planning process is we get the group together and we brainstorm a vision for the park for the future. This is one of the more creative and fun parts of planning, and we try not to go too crazy with it, but the vision that we eventually drafted for this park is that James Baird State Park will be an accessible year-round destination, offering a variety of events and diverse recreational opportunities while providing a healthy natural ecosystem that protects and enhances habitat for sensitive and significant species. So that vision is used basically throughout the planning process. We look at the goals and try to determine whether or not they are helping us realize the vision. The actions, we take this into consideration as well. So the components of a master plan, it's a little confusing. I was confused when I first started working for parks. It really has 3 different components. The first is the master plan document itself, which includes an introduction to the park as it is today, the description of the site and its history. It has a list of the action items that are proposed in the plan, and it has a table with implementation priorities. So published along with it is a second section, which is the environmental impact statement, or in this case, the draft environmental impact statement, DEIS, which includes a more detailed description of the environmental setting and the components in the park, physical, geographical, all of the cultural, it's very, very detailed. If you look at the complete document, you'll see it's quite extensive. Then that document goes into the alternatives that are being proposed at the park to implement and an analysis of those. Some preferred actions or alternatives are selected. And then there's a section that goes over, well, what will be the environmental impacts, the potential impacts of implementing these actions, and if needed, mitigation is described. And Nancy will talk about that a little. The appendices are part of the DEIS. They have a lot of maps and just different kinds of just background data on the park, policies, things like that, and a lot of graphic information there. It's actually kind of fun to look at from a planner's perspective. The third section of the plan is the master plan map, which is a graphic representation of the information that's basically proposed, the actions that are proposed. It includes a bulleted summary that you can see sort of a section of it here of the plan's proposed actions. And it shows the locations of existing and proposed items that are in the plan. So I'd like to now hand it over to the park manager, Kevin, to talk a little bit about what the park is like at the moment.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As manager at James Baird, I look forward to seeing these concepts come to fruition and allow us to better serve our patrons. Through many months of planning, compounded by doing so through a world pandemic, and with input from several different interest groups, including those of you on this call today, we have laid out the future of James Baird and excited to share that with you today. Natural resources are one of the most important elements of this facility. Our park wetlands support many diverse species, one of them being a rare population of turtles that relies on the habitat within and surrounding the park. Managing invasive plant and animal species helps to protect these communities. Cultural resources help to define the park's character. At Baird, these include the bathhouse, original to the park, was designed by a prominent New York architecture firm, Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. The park's bandshell, the roller rink, which was modified from its original intent, now serves as a basketball court, make up some of the original elements of the facility, and we have strived to keep these design elements intact for future additions. Comments received during previous public outreach efforts include a desire to protect the park's rural character. This includes elements such as open fields and the rubble stone walls, part of the cultural landscape of the park. The day use area offers a range of activities with the extremely popular pickleball courts, trails, picnic areas, and the turtle-themed playground. The large parking lot helps to accommodate public events like car shows and fundraising walks. The golf operation is our most popular recreation activity in the park. Our golf course is an 18-hole public course designed by world-renowned architect Robert Trent Jones. The driving range is a full-service practice facility, and the clubhouse hosts a seasonal restaurant open to the public, offering outdoor dining on our patio overlooking the golf course. Park operations and management is integral to a well-functioning park that meet visitor needs and expectations. These existing facilities include the shared park and regional maintenance facility, park utilities including water and energy uses including solar, park-wide signage, and staff housing. Back to you, Tana.
Donna, you're on mute.
Thank you. Oh, technology. So I'd like to get into some of the specifics of the plan now. One of the the early exercises that we do is we start to talk about what kinds of goals we have for the park, and then we refine those as the planning process goes on. The goals are sort of put into different buckets. We have natural resource goals, cultural resource goals, recreational resource goals, operations, maintenance, and infrastructure goals, and education and outreach goals, among others. Those are the biggest areas that we would look at. Some of the goals for the park include expanding protected habitat and creating new habitat for key species, expanding invasive species management efforts at the park, identifying cultural resources and providing parameters for their protection, preservation, rehabilitation, and the reuse of both design structures and the landscape. Under recreation, we are looking at proposed redevelopment of infrastructure and amenities. A lot of it is in the day use area. Operations and maintenance, provide an efficient and up-to-date maintenance area was one of the big things that came up in the course of looking at the site. The buildings themselves, the associated infrastructure, and to upgrade them with new and retrofitted elements. In terms of education and outreach, one of the goals is to enhance education and outreach, including publicity, programming, and partnerships to encourage a diverse range of people to visit the park. So I want to take a look at some of the specific actions that are proposed in the plan. These are proposed to help meet the goals in each category. So the first category, the park's wildlife and key habitat. These are actions that are being proposed to look for opportunities to enhance, protect, and expand wetlands and stream banks in the park, provide more pollinator habitat, and expand and improve habitat for turtles of conservation concern. Actions for enhancing the park's cultural resources include developing an interpretation program that tells the story of the park's establishment and the significance of its design. As I mentioned, a number of day use area upgrades are being proposed to redevelop the day use area parking lot, which is original to the park. The circulation needs to be improved. It would be great to reduce some of the impervious surface there and to incorporate environmentally friendly features. Also, when we were looking at the day use area, the turtle themed playground there is extremely popular. It's like a destination playground for the region, and it's a great playground. And a couple of the things that came up in the course of talking to people was that there was a need for shade in that area and also for seating. So accessible walking path around the playground is proposed with seating and shade structures. Other comments that came in had to do with the roadways, and a lot of people use the roadways to walk and to jog. The nearby high school students come and they use it for their cross-country team to exercise and train. One of the actions proposed is to install a park-wide accessible multi-use path that'll separate the pedestrians and the bicycles from the roadways. We've mapped out a really rough and conceptual kind of a route. It's the idea is not only to help people get off the road, but also to connect some of the existing paths and features in the park, including connecting the day use area to the golf course. As was mentioned earlier, there's a proposal to retrofit the bathhouse to accommodate larger events at the park, which was another need that was identified by the planners. And actions for recreation, to designate four-season use of selected trails with grooming for cross-country skiers, and installing a disc golf course, something that was considered to be low impact, very popular activity. At the Freedom Road area, which was the most recent acquisition that's been added to the park. There's a proposal to provide fishing access. There's a very pretty pond there. And this activity was also identified as popular in the area, and that there was a need for more of it in the region. Other improvements to operation and infrastructure, to redevelop the golf clubhouse parking lot for better circulation and overflow events, and also to develop a park-wide plan to improve signage, wayfinding, circulation, and interpretive signage. And I think I just saw a chat that related to that. So that's an action that's definitely proposed in the plan. To plan and implement traffic calming measures, and also we received a number of comments that the park's entrance could be improved with clearer signage and plantings and a more defined arrival experience, so that it's easier to see when you're driving down the road, and also creates more of an entrance for the park. In terms of improving the operations infrastructure, we mentioned redeveloping and updating the maintenance area. And visitors have probably noticed that there's a solar project that's been installed in the Freedom Road area. I don't know if this is online yet. We'll have to ask Kevin whether or not the project is online yet. It's completed.
Yes, it is.
Oh, thank you, Kevin.
Oh, thank you, Kevin.
All right. So those are a few of the highlights of the draft plan right now, and I'm interested to hear what your feedback on some of those and ideas, if we overlooked anything. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand it over to Nancy to talk about the environmental review in the.
Thanks, Tana. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, great. So the master plan undergoes an environmental review process to determine any potential impacts on park resources that may occur as a result of implementing the plan. So the State Environmental Quality Review Act, or SEQR review, is completed as part of the plan and planning process and results in the draft environmental impact statement, or EIS. So SEQR is required for all actions an agency approves, funds, or undertakes. In this case, that action is the adoption and implementation of the master plan. We had an earlier public comment period was held during the scoping process, and now with this public comment period on the draft document. So all comments received during public comment periods are considered during the development of the plan. In this case, responses to substantive comments that we receive on these draft documents will be provided in the final EIS. You can stay on this slide, Tana.
Sure.
So the EIS is a portion of the master plan that provides an analysis of all the proposed actions and alternatives that were considered, and then identifies the recommended alternatives or the preferred alternatives. So the EIS describes potential impacts and also looks at ways that we can avoid, minimize, and mitigate, in some cases, those impacts. This review process is designed to protect the park and its resources from adverse environmental impacts. And so the park's natural and cultural and scenic resources will be further protected as the plan is implemented through design and maintenance strategies. Design for specific projects may involve further coordination with our biologists and stewardship staff, our Division for Historic Preservation, the New York Natural Heritage Program, among other partners. So as projects in the plan are considered for implementation, they'll be reviewed for consistency against the master plan and EIS. And if those projects were not identified in enough detail and those potential impacts were not addressed, they may actually undergo further environmental review. So next slide. So the implementation of this plan, it will result in some physical change to the land where new recreation facilities will be developed. During the planning process, efforts were made to kind of keep most of that development in already disturbed areas or core areas of the park, which would reduce the amount of new disturbance in the park. Our water resources and wetlands will be protected during construction through erosion sediment control measures. Tana noted improvements to riparian areas for protection and enhancement, including better connectivity and buffers. We'll be implementing measures to protect rare species during design and implementation of projects. And I think Tana noted proactive steps to protect the rare turtle species in the park. Thank you. Back to you, Tana.
All right, thanks a lot, Nancy. I always need a refresher on that process. All right, so let me just take a look quickly at what our next steps are. We published the draft plan December 15th, so that was the start of the comment period when you folks who are on the call received the notification that it was available. Today, January 5th, is our public meeting for the draft master plan DEIS. And the end of the comment period is January 21st. Go through, don't comment today, but you think of things later, or if you prefer to send them in through email, there are a number of different ways that you can comment, and we'll go into that in a sec. We're aiming for March 2022 for the notice of completion when the final master plan FEIS is distributed, published and distributed. And then there's a minimum.
Tana, may I interrupt for a moment? I'm sorry, it's Linda.
Sure.
I just
Yeah.
want the process to be made clear. It's not if there's input that comes from here, and I see there's some ideas that are in the chat, and if we do feel that they're not reflected into the document, and after discussion they're adopted, that would be added into and reflected in either in the findings or in our action. So it's not that it happens and we go through it and we don't hear. It does get embraced and put in. So I just want to encourage you to continue to write your ideas and understand what the process line means.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Linda, for clarifying that. There's going to be a chapter in the final plan that is devoted to public comments, and then the agency provides responses to those comments. So we definitely really would appreciate your feedback and comments, and that'll show up in the final. So after we go through the notice of completion, which is just a formality there that we have to do, and there's a minimum 10 days following the NOC when we're making the final revisions to the plan, adding that chapter with the public comments and that kind of thing, and then eventually the master plan is adopted by the agency formally.
This is Diana. Can you go back? I just want to
Yep.
make some clarifications. From the end of the comment period in January is when we take all of your comments, all the public comments, and we make changes to the plan based on those comments. We continue to take comments throughout the entire planning process. But when we publish the final master plan, FEIS, anticipated sometime in March, that is going to reflect everyone's comments and any changes that we make to the plan. There is only a 10-day consideration period for agencies to consider the final master plan. And then the agency issues its finding statement and the commissioner adopts the plan. The finding statement is basically stating what the environmental impact statement found to be true and identifies any actions that are going to be taken as a result of the environmental impact statement. Once that is signed and adopted, we still can collect comments from the public after the final is published in March, and we will address any of those in the finding statement if they are substantive or we have forgotten anything. But the decision is not made about adopting the master plan until that findings and adoption statement is issued. And it will also be published on the website.
Great, thank you, Diana. That's very helpful. Okay. So once the plan has been adopted, go into the implementation period, which is implementation of the actions that are proposed in the plan are subject to availability of funding, of course, availability of staff in terms of implementing the project and maintenance issues, and also the need to balance investments throughout the park system. Additional review may be required for certain projects in the plan, which might include seeker. It might include the historic preservation review considerations or design review for specific projects as they go from conceptual to construction design. So in general, the master plan provides a blueprint for capital improvements and operational enhancements at the park for the next 10 to 15 years. All right, so that's the end of the presentation. I'd like to just quickly go through how you can provide comments today. You can either make a verbal comment or you can write something in the chat box. There's a raise hand little icon next to your name in the participants list. If you click on that, it'll give me a raised hand and I'll know that you'll want to make a comment. As we mentioned, end of the comment period is January 21st, so you can send an email to this address by January 21st. If you prefer to send a written comment through the regular mail, get it postmarked by January 21st, you can send it to my attention at this address. As I said, you can view copies on the park's website, and a recording of the meeting will be available also at the same location on the website. So I'd like to open it up now for comments. Please feel
Tana,
free.
can we start with what's in the chat? So Ellen Wagoner said, could we give more specifics about the day use plan, specifically how many additional pickleball courts will be created?
All right. See, let me just open up chat here so I can see it. Hi, Ellen. Thanks for your comment. The plan right now doesn't have a specific number of pickleball courts. We certainly are aware that it's really popular and we got a lot of comments during the scoping process. So that's something that's to be determined. I don't know if Kevin or if you want to step in and talk about the pickleball activities in the day use area.
Sure. So we're currently looking at converting one of the tennis courts this coming spring to putting probably 4 more courts on there. So the plan is this spring to do that. There'll be temporary courts that we can go back and forth between tennis and pickleball courts.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Also another comment, how about better signage for the trails? Yeah, definitely that was identified, and the trails themselves, there's an action in the plan to improve the trails in terms of if there's erosion, compaction, some of the trails, have some rocks and roots and things like that. And it's certainly understood, I know from walking around in the park myself, that that it would be helpful to have better signage And the park-wide signage plan also will address the location of different activities, because we have recognized and heard a lot of feedback in that area about the need for signage in the park in general. Let's see, we have a comment here. The turtle playground is indeed wonderful, but the lovely plantings have been overrun by weeds. Some volunteers have pulled them, but the staff needs to be clearly informed about the weeds versus plantings and be given time to remove the weeds. Thank you for that. Does anybody want to?
So I'll start and then I'll hand it to Kevin. This is Linda, but I will tell you that is a region-wide problem. Our staff are not good at horticultural recognition, and we struggle with that in every park. Some a little better, depending on how much knowledge some of the individuals have. We do a little bit better than others, but I will punt that to Kevin for the specifics on the pickleball playground.
The playground weeds have been a huge challenge from the get-go. We currently only have 2 park staff, so it is a challenge to send the guys down there to try to keep up with it. But we do realize they are an issue and do try to put staff to it as much as possible. It was great this year that we had some volunteers step up and offer to help out with that, but it definitely needs to be somebody on a weekly basis, and we just can't commit to that currently, but we do try.
And if I could add, we do, our gardens at Rockefeller are almost 100% actually they are 100% taken care of by volunteers. So if Ellen, if you have a group of people who might want to help, that would be fabulous.
The next comment in the chat is Freedom Road entrance sign is in particular need for update. Definitely recognize that. And I think as we noted in the presentation, there's a proposed, there's a new sign. And Kevin, wasn't there a sign designed that's ready to go? Is that the entrance that the sign is available? It's going to be available?
We do have a design that it's ready to go. We're just working on the funding right now.
I strongly support the plans to improve wildlife habitat. Yep, and there's certainly, is anybody else, do you want to elaborate on that, Brian, or is there anything in particular you had in mind? Another question was, how much longer will agriculture be active in the east side of Freedom Road property? I would look to the regional people to respond to that.
The current plan is to continue farming with the current leasee until they are done with their operation, and then it will get turned back over to native lands. I don't have an exact year on that at this point.
I think that we talked about having very minimal development in the Freedom Road area. Some of the areas will be wildlife, what do you call it? Meadows, and that kind of habitat will be encouraged.
So that is an open-ended sunset date, if you will, for the agriculture.
At this point, yes, but it is in the master plan that once the current leasee is done, we will no longer be offering any lands to agriculture usage.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Let's see, will there be, is there a citizen action committee as part of this process? I am not sure. Maybe Elena, can you describe possibly what you mean by that, as opposed to the public outreach that we've done so far. What would a citizen action committee look like?
I think that was a comment from Paul Horstman.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was thinking of an action committee similar to what we've used for other large, public projects where, people actually got together with members of the community and presented in detail these plans as opposed to just depending upon a rather passive review of published material. So you could have more of an in-person or a remote Q&A activity. We found those to be very effective with the Route 55 roundabout plans that were organized by DOT.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know if Diana, you want to jump in here. I think, as I said earlier, ordinarily we would have had an open house, a public open house, and we totally agree with you that that would have been a preferred way to go. And this plan was started right at the cusp of COVID, and I'm afraid we've been stuck with the technological approach right for now. But Diana, do you want to talk about? You want to address that comment?
Sure. Yes, normally we do have several opportunities for the public to participate in the planning process. Usually early on, we try to have a public information meeting where we are information gathering rather than just presenting ideas and asking for comments and concerns about these ideas. We were not able to have one of those because of the onset of COVID. Normally, these are in-person meetings in open house format where we are discussing in a very casual manner the resources in the park. Same with our scoping process. We invited the people, the public to participate in helping us define what resources need to be analyzed and make sure that we encourage or that we are encouraged to analyze and identify any potential impacts to the resources of the park. And then this is another opportunity, this type of forum during a public comment period on the draft environmental impact statement and draft master plan, where we would normally have an in-person meeting again in an open house type of format and collect comments on the proposed draft master plan. We can have additional meetings, but at this point, this is our premier opportunity right now. If we hear enough from other individuals that there will be that they need to have more time to look at the master plan and provide comments, we could consider another meeting. We could also consider extending the comment period. But at this point, we've had several individuals make comments, and we feel that we've covered most everyone's concerns in the preparation of this document. But continue to submit your comments. The park is always, and the region, they're always willing to hear from their park patrons. And the park does have a friends group, I believe. So
No, we do not.
you do not? So maybe that is something that we could look into, including into the draft master plan. And there might be, maybe someone could volunteer to head up that initiative.
And was
Back
there
to you.
anything, I'm sorry, was there anything specific in terms of the um, not being able to participate in an open house that you were concerned about, Paul?
Well, I mean, I was looking at, and maybe it's my own lack of foresight in reviewing the material that we had, but you have many hundreds of pages of material, and it would have been nice to go over some of the details as to what do you mean by habitat enhancement in a forum where we can have a discussion about that rather than people reading it, coming to their own impressions, and then only commenting if it, behooves them. It just seems like a little more interactive environment would be good. I don't know if you could do that at this late date. It seems that you're kind of depending a lot upon volunteers, and so we maybe need to have some way of organizing and recruiting volunteers. I think that would be very helpful. Not that I'm volunteering to do that. I think my plate's pretty full personally, but just an observation on where you are at in this process.
Well, thank you for your comment. That's very helpful. It's a good point.
I mean, I pulled up the entire map of what is being proposed, and I like the notion and of what you've tried to do with the new area where the solar arrays are, and that it's a very ambitious thing, and I think that's but you should kind of have a little more structured presentation of the plan, which would elicit probably a fair amount of constructive comments from your citizenry.
And is that in relation to the solar alone or just the freedom?
It's what I would have called the old Tobin Farm property.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I guess I would like to agree with Paul's comment that I would have appreciated more specifics about, and I don't think it would have had to take a whole lot of additional time, but to simply say we're going to improve this area and that area and the other area doesn't really provide much information. I mean, so again, it sounds like in general it's probably a pretty good plan, but it would have been a more satisfying meeting to have some particulars when you were talking about the upgrades. I mean, to have included, for example, the pickleball has become very popular, and we're considering converting one of the tennis courts. I mean, that wouldn't have, that would have been helpful. And we want to try and take care of invasive species, and here's 2 paragraphs about what we're thinking we'll do, and I wish you had done that. So, but I guess I'll have to take a look at your plan, and I'll fault myself. I hadn't gone looking for this as an opportunity. I responded to someone's email that said, "Oh, this hearing is happening," and I said, "Oh, I'd like to hear that," and I didn't really have an opportunity or take an opportunity to look at the material ahead of time. But, and it seemed, I mean, I guess this is a very common problem. I noticed there are, 12 or 15 participants here, including your staff, and that's not very many. And, again, I just happened to find out about it, and I'm not sure how it is publicized, unless you are a person who regularly goes to the park website, which we may not have occasion to do. So, I'm really glad that you're planning to, that you're giving this much attention to planning on maintaining and upgrading the park. I don't mean this as to sound too critical, but you mentioned a couple of times funding limitations. How much more money would it take to be able to do all the things you'd like to do? How far from the wish list are we?
There have not been specific budgets, developed for the actions in the plan. I think that what the plan does is it gets these projects, these kinds of actions on the radar, and that they, will be looked at in as priorities. The plan does provide priorities. Diana, do you want to jump in here?
You're going to need to mute yourself, so that's what was causing the echo. And Tana, you're going to need to speak up. It was getting, you got very, very, it was hard to hear that last one. And maybe Diana may be the better person to speak more eloquently on what the function of a master plan is, but we don't end up necessarily detailing specific, all the specific projects with lots of specific budgets associated with them, but we create a path. So we create a vision and said that, okay, this is the direction we want to go in. It is millions upon millions of dollars to actually attain. It's not millions to perhaps fund the replacement of the sign on Freedom Road, at the entrance of the park, but to do all of what is in the large part of the plan is, a few million for this parking lot, a number of millions for this building, another millions for the various pieces of infrastructure. So what the master plan does is help inform a direction and for looking at how we apply for budget funding or how we anticipate staffing. And sometimes there are outside elements that will affect that have nothing to do with what we want to do, but at least you have a forward path and it's identified. And there's some pieces of that you can do on your own. And so in terms of just whether the conversion on the pickleball courts, that's something that Kevin was just doing as a matter of fact. So it wasn't necessarily going into the long-term plan because it was something he was planning to do right away. But certainly could be reflected I think it is reflected in the plan on how popular the pickleball has been, and that's been a tremendous enhancement to the park. And we're indebted to Jane McLaughlin, who's a former regional director, who introduced it to us. I remember the first time I saw the video on it, said, "What the heck is this?" And it's now a national, if not international, phenomena. But it's and activity. So I think that I think I enjoy reading master plans. You see the history of them, you see the context, you will see more on the environmental work that's done, what's identified. And the reason this park has been identified for a lot of the invasive work is because when you have the turtle habitat, you don't want the invasive species to come in and take over the invasive plants, to come in and take over that habitat, so that it would drive out what makes it attractive for the Atlantic turtles or other things. So I think if you do get a chance, read it. You don't have to read it all at once, but just read it in bits and pieces, and then maybe think about whether there are any comments or anything that we're missing that would be useful, or if you want any more detail on any of it, we are certainly willing to schedule a session that's outside of this formal master plan one to go over any of the material that's involved in how we're approaching the park's future. So I did thank you for all your comments. Tanya, you would keep going on the chat.
Thank you. Thanks, Linda. And also just to respond to the issue of outreach, we will make sure that everyone who's on this at this meeting today will be on the contact list. Because we try very hard to maintain a current contact list, and we use a lot of different resources to put that out there. So so we'll just make sure that everyone who's here is on the contact list, and you'll get any future information about any future public activities. So let's see, I have a couple of other notes in the chat that there are many wild thistles in the landscaping. Let's see, are there any plans for trails that would take one through or around the fields near the old house and old road entrance and around the solar area with its beautiful views? Yes, we have a conceptual plan for to go through the Freedom Road area. There already are some existing agricultural roads and some sort of paths that have been worn through there, and those will be more defined. And then we'll also have paths to go over to the pond, so we'll have a fishing area, and of course there will be directional signage and that kind of thing. So so that is definitely in the works there. Another comment in the chat is, does the work on improving the Blanding turtle habitats involve any interaction with Arlington High School, as they have a very active turtle tracking project and have local turtle habitat adjacent to the park?
I'll speak to that, Donna.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
So Paul, we do work with the high school. We have a team of regional biologists that kind of spearhead all the turtle tracking and anything to do with the Blandings in the park. And they are, always in contact with that group and several others who do both work in the spring and fall, tracking the turtles, finding, protecting the nest, and then finding the hatchlings and so on in the fall. So we do coordinate with the high school and several other groups.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin.
Another comment, if the pickleball has not been addressed, from Nick, was your comment or your question addressed?
Sorry, I'm tuning in late. If pickleball has already been discussed, I don't want to rehash it. I think there are people on who have probably addressed it. I don't know.
Kevin, do you just want to quickly say what your time frame is on that again?
Yes, Nick, we're looking to convert one of the tennis courts into possibly 4 more pickleball courts that would be able to use for tennis and pickleball. So we could remove the nets to play tennis, but also, we realize that pickleball is much more in demand, and we've got to create some more spaces for that. So we're hoping this spring to start that process.
That sounds just what I wanted to hear. Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Let's see. Is it possible to correct the aiming of the lights in the maintenance area? They're extremely bright and not properly aimed or covered to prevent light beaming onto the adjoining properties. The disarrayed sprawl of the area is a concern, as well as possible hazmat issues. Can this be addressed?
Dave, if you'd like, we can get together here in the near future. If you want to come over, or we could set up a time to make sure we direct that. I wasn't aware that it was bothering anybody. We do have it on timers, so please feel free to reach out and we can come up with a way to take care of that for you.
Thank you, Kevin.
The question about the sprawl and the hazmat issues is also one. Kevin, you want to take a stab at that too? It's a part of that question as well.
Yes, so we do have some designs done to try to improve the flow at our maintenance area and, clean things up and try to put an organized workspace in place. As far as the hazmat, we have to follow the DEC rules on all the bulk petroleum storage, which we do monthly inspections for that. We've had testing done from our landfill on a regular basis. All our water systems are tested yearly, and part of that is hazardous materials in the ground and in the water. So we really do stay on top of that. And, as far as I know, at least in my tenure here, we have not had any issues with those, with hazmat issues. But, the fuel tanks they are all up to snuff as far as spill prevention. We have a spill prevention plan in place. We do really stay on top of those things. It's a big concern here with the wetlands and everything else in the park. So we definitely do stay on top of those issues.
And just as an aside, and really sort of speaking to the funding of all of this, as Ellen asked before, we had a plan to redo the whole maintenance area, and even it got a little bit of traction in Albany for a little while until it came up with a several $1 million price tag, in which case it lost a little traction in Albany, along with the declination of some of the budgets. So the staff, both the Baird staff and the regional maintenance staff, have been doing a great job over the last few years, just working on their own to rebuild some of the structures and make it not as sprawly, but a little more directed, and look at the circulation flow of how things are going. And the goal is to continue to do that. We thought, ironically, I thought that even moving it from that area, just because of where the turtles were on the site, might be a good idea, but we just weren't able to get enough funding to make that feasible. So we're working with what we can to make better shops, and we always have to follow. We're pretty rigorous in terms of following anything with an environmental impact on it. So thanks for raising it. We notice it as well.
Linda. So there's another comment that came up, dead trees from beaver dams flooding the local properties. I think, Kevin, you might be able to respond to that.
Yes, if anybody has any specific concerns, trees that are hazardous to your property or any of the buildings that are on the park property, please please reach out and we can work on that together. As far as the trees that are farther out into the swamp and, those previously flooded areas, we leave those alone. If they're not a threat to anything, it is best to just kind of let those trees go in areas that are not not used by people. That's the best for the wildlife and the habitats, especially if we don't have to go traipsing through those areas. We're not gonna. But if you have any specific concerns, please let me know.
Kevin, this is Brian. With regard to the beaver issue, in terms of an update, are they inactive at this point, with respect to this issue?
Brian, they've been gone for about a year. We got a permit from DEC to lower the dam a little bit there. But that did work. The water level has dropped quite a bit. And I've been on top of that, making sure that it doesn't build back up. But about a year ago, the beavers did move on.
Okay, so that's something that'll be monitored on an ongoing basis.
Yes, now that I know that they were back there, we do. I go back there a couple times a year just to make sure everything's good. So we plan on keeping a keen eye on that.
Okay, thank you.
That's all I have in the chat. So anybody would like to bring up anything else? Now's the time. Any thought regarding additional property acquisitions? This came up.
Linda, would you like to respond to that?
Sure. The answer is yes. That was one of the main discussions we had at the very beginning of the master plan, and we sort of looked at contiguous properties, at how far are we away from the DEC, Harrisburg area, and we indeed would be interested in continuing to protect and expand James Baird, but we don't have anything specific in the works at the moment. We've sent some, well, that's not true. We've sent some up for consideration to Albany, but we don't have anything in, that we're in negotiation on at the moment.
And you're aware of the large parcel that's available at present on Freedom Road? North of the park, north of your most recent acquisition?
I don't know that much about it. I did see somebody had mentioned it in another comment, so I should learn more about it.
Yeah, that would be one I think that we as neighbors would, like to bring to your attention as a possible opportunity.
Great. I look forward to learning more about it.
Anybody else? Opportunity? Maybe Diana, if you want to talk a little bit more about how the master plan and funding, how that works in the agency.
Well, I think Linda covered it pretty well. We do use master plans to help us inform what we call our 5-year capital funding plan. Excuse me for static. So it is basically a tool for the regions to use. They're expected to take these plans off the shelf and develop projects to submit to Albany for capital funding and get it included in the capital budget. So every year, once this master plan is completed, that will the region should be and the park should be looking at what they think they could accomplish and how much it would cost. And at that point, they would develop site plans and submit it up to the capital districts for funding. And that's how the plan gets implemented. The plans are not meant to be implemented all at once. Obviously, Tana, you mentioned phasing, but we do look for high priority projects. And if funding becomes available, the region may look to projects or actions in the plan that are in out years because they were just too much to do and bring them forward into the nearer years when as they have funding available. So there is some flexibility in how the plan is implemented, but it is always dependent upon the regional priorities. Natural disasters have waylaid several of our well-laid plans, but we have to, see what the budget climate looks like as well as the construction climate. Sometimes we can't get contractors to do these projects, so we have to put them off. But that's pretty much it. Like Linda said, it provides them a path forward and kind of a menu to pick and choose what projects they think they can move forward and which would benefit the park. Obviously, the longer the plan sits on a shelf inactive, the less relevant it becomes, but we encourage the regions and the parks to refer back to their master plans frequently and get them implemented. So if something should change, we can always go back and take a look at the master plan and make amendments to it. It's meant to be a dynamic document, elastic, and suit the needs of the park and the region.
Thank you, Diana.
You're welcome.
What else?
There was another comment on the Freedom Road parcel, Tana. The plan is to put a small parking lot in at the entrance, the current entrance to the old Tobin property there where the house used to be. Right now, we don't have a plan to cross Freedom Road, for patrons, walking, just as the amount of traffic, and it would just be too dangerous at this point to try to have any pedestrian crossing there. So it would have to be, you'd have to drive there and use the parking lot.
Thanks, Kevin. Any other thoughts?
Only that Kevin is reminding me, and it did sound familiar, that he did point out that parcel to us earlier in the year. And we did, that's why I thought, I knew we had something we had started working on, but I'm just not that familiar with it at present, but it has been pointed out to us. So we have the preliminary information about it, what the 110 acre parcel, correct? That's what you're talking about?
I believe that's the one. It's known locally as the Dandenau property. If that's the one we're speaking about.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Well, I do encourage everyone to take a look at the plan. There is quite a bit of detail and specifics that we were not able to cover today, as you noted, Ellen. And these public meetings have their limitations, and we recognize that. So appreciate your joining and your forbearance. Our goal is to create a high quality plan that'll be usable and appropriate for the people who actually use the park. Are there any other thoughts or concerns? Got a note that says Freedom Road could be rerouted to eliminate 2 sharp curves that have led to many fatalities. Purchasing the farm would allow this.
Kevin sent it to me last June, so we'll see where it is. All righty.
So the recording of the meeting will be available. If you know people who were not able to come or were not on the mailing list, please let them know that they can listen to it, and you can fast forward, and you can go through it and see if there was anything of interest, and you still have opportunity to send in your comments, as you can see on the screen here. Until January 21st. And you can submit them either by email. This is our email address, jamesbaird.plan@parks.ny.gov. Or you can send your written comments by regular mail by January 21st to postmark to myself, Tana Bigelow, 625 Broadway, the second floor, Albany, New York, 12238. All right, well, that said, I really appreciate everybody's participation during these strange and difficult times, and I look forward to moving forward on the plan and a good outcome in general. So thanks very much for your interest, and I will close the meeting.
Tana, a question was whether the presentation was available as well as the plan?
Yep, the recording of the meeting, is that what you're talking about, Linda?
No, charts. It says, Paul Horseman is asking, how do we get a copy of the charts? I assume you mean the PowerPoint?
Yeah, especially since the charts have a lot of your references in them, your addresses, emails, etc. It would be nice if that was available via some sort of electronic media.
Sure, I believe that can be posted. I think we do on occasion post that on our website, so I can,
Yes,
I'll look.
we
Yeah.
can convert it to a format that can be posted. The slide deck will be posted.
So we'll post it in the same place that the master plan is posted.
Thanks.
Sure. All right. Well, thanks again. And
Thank you.
yep, you folks have a good one, and I will close the meeting.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
You too.
Thanks all.